The crystalline corridors of the Velthari research station hummed with anticipation as Kixnall approached the massive viewport. Beyond the transparent aluminum barrier floated humanity's prize, a derelict warship designated UES Ironforge, captured during the brief skirmish at Kepler 442b. The vessel hung motionless in the docking bay's artificial gravity field, its gunmetal hull scarred by plasma burns and meteor impacts. "Magnificent specimen," whispered Velkrim, the station's chief xenoarchaeologist, her six-fingered hands dancing across the holographic interface. 73 meters of primitive human engineering. Our preliminary scans indicate their weapon. Systems are laughably outdated. Kinetic projectile launchers and chemical explosives. Kixnall's mandibles clicked in amusement. The Velthari Empire had conquered 17 star systems using plasma cannons that could melt through neutronium plating. What threat could these hairless primates possibly pose with their crude ballistic weapons? "Begin full structural analysis," Kixnall commanded, his bioluminescent patches pulsing with authority. "Map every corridor. Catalog every component." The High Command wants to understand how these humans managed to spread across 43 worlds with such inferior technology. The research teams scattered like insects across the station's various departments. Dr. Ixthera led the materials analysis division, her specialized limbs already reaching for spectrometers and molecular scanners. The engineering corps, headed by the methodical Krelvin, prepared to dissect the ship's propulsion systems. Meanwhile, tactical analyst Zephmore began constructing three-dimensional models of the vessel's weapon placements. As the hours passed, data streams flowed across countless displays. The ship's armor revealed itself to be a composite of titanium steel alloys. Impressive by primitive standards, but no match for Velthari plasma weapons. The propulsion system utilized fusion reactors. That generated barely 3% of the energy output their own antimatter drives produced. "Their computer systems are particularly fascinating," reported Ixthera, her voice carrying a note of condescending curiosity. "Multiple redundant processors running on binary logic. Quaint, really. Our quantum processing arrays could decode their entire database in minutes." Kixnall nodded approvingly as he reviewed the preliminary reports. Everything confirmed their initial assessments. Humanity was exactly what they appeared to be. A young, technologically inferior species that had stumbled onto interstellar travel through sheer persistence rather than genuine innovation. The breakthrough came during the third day of analysis. Krelvin's team had finally gained access to the ship's central processing core, bypassing several layers of encryption that had delayed their progress. As the alien symbols resolved into readable data on their translation matrices, excited chittering filled the research bay. "We've accessed their tactical databases," Krelvin announced, his compound eyes reflecting the glow of scrolling information. "Combat records, fleet compositions, strategic analyses, everything." But as the data poured across their screens, the chittering gradually died away. Kixnall felt his bioluminescent patches dimming as he processed what he was seeing. These weren't the tactical records of a primitive species fumbling through space with outdated weapons. These were the archives of a civilization that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. War. Endless, brutal, innovative war. Planet-wide conflicts involving billions of combatants, weapons that could level continents, strategies refined through millennia of bloodshed. "This can't be accurate," Velkrim whispered, her voice barely audible above the station's humming. Machinery. But the data didn't lie. And somewhere in the depths of space, humanity's real fleet was already moving. Silence stretched across the research station's main laboratory like a suffocating shroud. The only sounds were the soft hum of atmospheric processors and the occasional nervous click of Velthari mandibles as the assembled scientists absorbed the implications of their discovery. Kixnal's primary eyes remained fixed on the holographic display, where a three-dimensional timeline of human conflicts rotated slowly in the chamber's center. Each point of light represented a war, and there were thousands, no, millions of them, spanning their recorded history. "Show me the Crimean conflict," he commanded, his voice barely above a whisper. The display zoomed to focus on a particular cluster of data points from humanity's pre-space era. As the information translated, gasps echoed through the chamber. They systematically starved entire populations. Dr. Ixithera read aloud, her normally steady voice trembling. Used disease as a weapon. Developed tactics specifically designed to maximize psychological trauma in their enemies. "That's impossible," Velkrim protested, her 6 fingers clenching into fists. The Galactic Council's psychological profiles indicate humans possess strong, empathetic responses. Their brain chemistry shows clear capacity for cooperation and altruism. Krelvin manipulated the display, bringing up detailed scans of human neural pathways they'd performed on prisoners from previous encounters. "The emotional centers are remarkably active," he confirmed. "They feel pain, fear, and compassion more intensely than most species we've cataloged." "Then how?" Velkrim began. "They feel everything," Kixnal interrupted, his understanding crystallizing like ice in his chest. "But they learned to weaponize those feelings. Show me the Great European War." The display shifted to reveal a conflict that had consumed an entire continent for 4 years. The casualty figures were staggering, millions of individuals, ground into paste by artillery bombardments and chemical weapons. But what horrified the Velthari researchers wasn't the scale of the slaughter, it was the innovation. They created new forms of chemical warfare, Zephyr reported, his tactical mind struggling to process the implications. Not just to kill efficiently, but to cause maximum suffering. They wanted their enemies to die slowly, in agony, as a psychological weapon against survivors. The database contained detailed technical specifications for mustard gas, chlorine, gas, and dozens of other compounds designed specifically to cause excruciating death. But worse were the strategic documents, clinical analyses of how terror tactics could break enemy morale faster than simple annihilation. "Military Doctrine Evolution," Ixthara continued reading, her voice growing more strained with each revelation. "Human strategists learned that fear was more effective than superior numbers. They developed psychological warfare techniques that could shatter enemy formations without firing a shot." Kixnal's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed this information. The Velthari Empire had conquered 17 star systems through technological superiority. Their plasma weapons and shields were simply better than anything they'd encountered. They had never needed to develop elaborate psychological tactics because physical dominance had always been sufficient. "Show me their space-age conflicts," he ordered. What followed was even more disturbing. The Martian Rebellion, the Titan Mining Wars, the Belt Confederation conflict. Each one demonstrated increasingly sophisticated applications of terror, misdirection, and psychological manipulation. "They used their own colonies as bait," Krelvin whispered, highlighting a particular tactical analysis. "Deliberately sacrificed civilian populations to lure enemy fleets into ambushes. The psychological impact on enemy commanders was considered more valuable than the immediate tactical advantage." "Look at this," Zephyr called out, his voice tight with disbelief. "Combat doctrine from the Proxima campaign. They call it Fear Cascade Deployment. They would capture enemy vessels, broadcast the torture sessions to nearby fleets, then release the ships with the crews still alive, but modified. The psychological trauma was so severe that enemy commanders would surrender entire battle groups rather than risk capture. The research team had spent 3 days analyzing what they believed was a primitive warship. Now they realized they'd been dissecting the equivalent of a training vessel, a ship designed to look weak, to appear vulnerable, to draw enemies in close enough for the real weapons to be effective. "The energy signature," Velkrim said suddenly, her voice filled with dawning horror. We detected only basic fusion reactors, but what if those weren't their primary power sources? Chixnall finished. What if this entire vessel is designed to appear technologically inferior while hiding its true capabilities? As if summoned by their realization, proximity alarms began blaring throughout the station. On the long-range sensors, energy signatures were appearing. Dozens of them, approaching at impossible speeds. The human fleet had found them. Admiral Vexara's command chamber aboard the Velthari dreadnought, sevenfold dominion erupted into controlled chaos as tactical displays materialized around her elevated command throne. Her primary consciousness tendrils interfaced directly with the ship's quantum computing matrix, processing incoming data at rates that would have liquefied lesser minds. 57 contacts, reported her tactical coordinator, Nick Savell. Range, 400,000 kilometers and closing. Configuration analysis indicates, Admiral, this is impossible. Vexara's attention fractured across multiple data streams simultaneously. The approaching human vessels were broadcasting on standard diplomatic frequencies, their transmission arrays painting them as a peaceful exploration fleet. Long range. Scans detected minimal energy signatures. Basic fusion reactors, simple magnetic deflectors, even rudimentary life support systems. But their approach vectors told a different story entirely. They're moving in a perfect spiral formation, Zeph Dak, her strategic analysis officer, observed with barely contained amazement. Each vessel maintaining precise distance from its neighbors while adjusting for gravitational influences from the local asteroid field. The computational requirements for that level of coordination are beyond their demonstrated technological capabilities, Vexara finished. Her tendrils coiled tighter around the interface nodes as additional data flowed through her consciousness. Show me their communication patterns. The holographic display shifted to reveal a complex web of transmission protocols. On the surface, the human ships appeared to be using simple radio communications, the kind of primitive technology the Velthari had abandoned millennia ago. But embedded within those broadcasts were mathematical sequences so elegant and sophisticated that the station's computers required several processing cycles to identify them. They're not just communicating, Nick Savell realized, his voice filled with growing unease. They're performing real-time tactical calculations across their entire formation. Each vessel is simultaneously acting as both individual unit and distributed processing node. Vexara's secondary consciousness streams began analyzing the human's captured database, while her primary awareness monitored the approaching fleet. The psychological profiles were consistent. Humanity demonstrated exceptional capacity for both cooperation and individual initiative. But their military history revealed something more disturbing. They had spent millennia developing strategies specifically designed to defeat technologically superior opponents. Deception protocols, she murmured, accessing records of human conflicts, with advanced artificial intelligences during their early space age. They developed tactical doctrines specifically for fighting enemies with superior processing power and sensor capabilities. The approaching fleet continued broadcasting peaceful intentions while maintaining formation geometry that would allow them to engage multiple targets simultaneously within 17 seconds of receiving hostile action. Their apparent technological limitations were contradicted by maneuvers that required computational precision the Velthari found difficult to match. Admiral, Zephdak's voice carried a note of barely controlled panic. Their formation, it's not defensive. They're positioning themselves to exploit our blind spots. Sensor shadows created by our own defensive array geometry. Vexara's analysis streams confirmed the assessment. The humans had approached using gravitational lensing effects from nearby stellar bodies to mask their true numbers. What appeared to be 57 vessels might actually be several hundred, with the majority hidden behind carefully calculated sensor shadows. They know our capabilities, she realized with crystalline clarity. They've studied our technology, our tactics, our psychological profiles. This entire approach is designed to exploit our preconceptions about their primitive status. The communication console chimed with an incoming transmission. Vexara authorized the connection, and a human face appeared on her display. Weathered features, calculating eyes that seemed to assess her even through the communication link. Velthari Command Vessel, the human spoke in accented but competent galactic standard. This is Fleet Admiral Kreshimir of the United Earth Expeditionary Force. We're here to retrieve our property. Vexara's tendrils tightened around her interface nodes. Human vessel, you are entering Velthari territorial space without authorization. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The human's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. A predatory focus that made Vexara's chitinous exoskeleton crawl with unease. Admiral, with respect, we've already analyzed your defensive capabilities. Your plasma cannons have an effective range of 200,000 kilometers. Your shield generators require a 3-second recycling period between maximum output phases. Your tactical computers process information at approximately 47 teraflops per second. Each statement was delivered with casual precision, as if reciting a shopping list. But the implications were staggering. The humans possessed detailed intelligence about Velthari military technology that should have taken years of espionage to acquire. Our ship, Kreshimir continued, contains information you shouldn't have access to. We're prepared to negotiate for its return, but I want to be clear about something. We've spent the last 10,000 years learning how to kill things that are bigger, stronger, and more advanced than we are. The transmission ended, leaving Vexara's command chamber in stunned silence. On the tactical displays, the human fleet continued its inexorable approach, maintaining perfect formation discipline while broadcasting peaceful intentions. Back aboard the Velthari research station, Kixnal's team worked frantically to extract additional intelligence from the captured human vessel's databases. Every new piece of information painted an increasingly disturbing picture of humanity's true capabilities. Cross-reference the technical specifications, Kixnal commanded, his bioluminescent patches flickering with stress patterns. Compare their stated technological limitations with the maneuvers we're observing from their approaching fleet. Dr. Ixithara's specialized appendages danced across multiple interfaces simultaneously. The discrepancies are enormous, she reported. According to this vessel's technical documentation, human ships should be incapable of the precision maneuvers we're witnessing. Yet their formation control suggests processing capabilities that rival our own quantum matrices. Krelvin had been analyzing the ship's construction for 3 days, but now he was reassessing everything with fresh perspective. Wait, he said suddenly, his compound eyes focusing on a particular structural element. These support struts, I assumed they were primitive reinforcement bars, but look at their molecular composition. The holographic display zoomed in on what appeared to be simple metal beams running through the ship's superstructure. But at the molecular level, the truth became apparent. These weren't support struts at all. Quantum entanglement communication. Arrays, Velkarim whispered, her voice filled with growing horror. They've embedded instantaneous communication networks throughout their entire ship structure. This vessel can coordinate with their fleet in real time across any distance. The implications struck the research team like a plasma bolt. The human ship they'd been analyzing wasn't just a derelict, it was an active intelligence gathering platform, monitoring everything they did and transmitting the information back to the approaching fleet. Shut down all active scans immediately, Chixnal ordered, but he knew it was already too late. How long has this vessel been transmitting? Since the moment we brought it aboard, Krelvin confirmed, his analysis revealing the terrible truth. Every scan we performed, every system we accessed, every tactical analysis we conducted, all of it has been transmitted to the human fleet. Zephmore's tactical displays showed the approaching human formation adjusting its vector in real time, making subtle course corrections that perfectly countered each defensive measure the Velthari had considered. They're not just approaching, he realized. They're adapting. Every defensive position we analyze, every tactical option we evaluate, they know about it instantly and adjust accordingly. The research station's command center received a priority transmission from Admiral Vexera aboard the Sevenfold Dominion. Her image appeared on the main display, her tendrils writhing with barely controlled agitation. Research Station Gamma 7, what is your status regarding the human vessel? Kixenal's mandibles clicked nervously. Admiral, we've made a significant discovery. The vessel appears to be a trap, Vexara finished. We've reached the same conclusion. How much intelligence have they gathered? The question hung in the air like toxic gas. Ixathera consulted her analysis matrices, her expression growing more stricken with each calculation. Complete tactical specifications for our plasma cannon arrays, shield modulation frequencies, computer processing protocols, psychological profiles of our command structure. They've essentially performed a comprehensive intelligence operation using our own research as the vector. Furthermore, Krelvin added, his voice tight with realization, their vessel's design suggests this was intentional. They allowed us to capture a ship specifically configured to appear primitive while functioning as an intelligence-gathering platform. Vexara's image flickered as her quantum communication link experienced interference. Prepare for immediate evacuation of all research personnel. The human fleet is... The transmission cut off abruptly as new contacts appeared on the stations. Sensor arrays. The human fleet had split into multiple formations, with some vessels maintaining their approach, while others had somehow appeared at completely different vectors. Impossible unless they possessed transportation technology far beyond Velthari capabilities. How are they doing this? Velkrim demanded, her 6 fingers working frantically across sensor control interfaces. Their database indicates they haven't developed translocation technology. Kixnal studied the tactical display with growing understanding. They don't need translocation technology. Look at their approach patterns. They've been using gravitational assist maneuvers and sensor shadows to position vessels throughout this entire system without us detecting them. We've been seeing only the ships they wanted us to see. The horrifying truth crystallized. Humanity hadn't sent a fleet to retrieve their vessel. They had sent a comprehensive tactical operation designed to gather intelligence, assess Velthari capabilities, and position forces for maximum strategic advantage. And it had all been accomplished using technology the Velthari had dismissed as primitive. The station's proximity alarms began blaring as additional human vessels decloaked from behind asteroids where they'd been waiting for days. The captured ship's real purpose became clear. It wasn't just gathering intelligence, it was serving as a targeting beacon, providing precise coordinates for weapons that shouldn't have been able to threaten Velthari installations. Incoming. Transmission from the human fleet, the communication officer announced, his voice barely steady. Admiral Kreshimir's face reappeared on their displays, but this time his expression carried no pretense of diplomatic courtesy. Velthari Research, Station. You have 30 seconds to return our property and evacuate your personnel. After that, we demonstrate why 10 millennia of warfare makes up for a lot of technological disadvantages. Admiral Vexara's primary consciousness streams fractured across 17 different tactical analysis matrices as her fleet prepared for engagement. The Sevenfold Dominion and her escort vessels had arranged themselves in standard Velthari battle formation, a configuration that had proven devastatingly effective against every species they'd encountered in their expansion across the galaxy. All vessels report ready status, Nixavel announced from his tactical station. Plasma cannon arrays charged to maximum output, shield generators operating at peak efficiency. Our formation provides overlapping coverage that should eliminate any possibility of human vessels penetrating our defensive perimeter. Vexara's analysis streams confirmed the assessment. The Velthari possessed overwhelming technological advantages. Their plasma weapons could pierce any known armor at ranges that exceeded human weapons capabilities by factors of 10. Their shields could absorb energy outputs equivalent to small, stellar flares. Their sensors could detect and track thousands of targets simultaneously across light years of space. Yet something in the human admiral's tone during their last communication had triggered ancestral fear responses in her species. Genetic memory, echoes of ancient predators that had stalked the Velthari homeworld before they achieved spaceflight. Human fleet is holding position at 250,000 kilometers, Zefdak reported. They're maintaining their original formation, but I'm detecting some kind of activity within their vessels. The tactical displays showed subtle energy fluctuations within the human ships, patterns that didn't match any known weapon systems or defensive measures. The fluctuations were rhythmic, almost organic, like a heartbeat spreading through their entire formation. They're charging weapons, Vexara decided. All vessels, prepare to engage, target their lead ship, and the universe exploded into chaos. What? The Velthari sensors had interpreted as weapons charging was actually something far more sophisticated. A coordinated information warfare attack that turned their own technology against them. The human fleet had spent days analyzing Velthari systems through their captured vessel, learning not just the technical specifications, but the fundamental logic patterns underlying their technology. Every sensor array aboard the Velthari fleet simultaneously reported massive energy signatures appearing throughout the battle space, thousands of contacts, all broadcasting target acquisition locks. The quantum computers that manage their defensive systems became overwhelmed trying to process threat assessments for targets that didn't actually exist. "Phantom contacts!" Nixavel shouted over the alarm klaxons. "They're spoofing our sensors with false signatures. Our targeting systems can't differentiate between real and projected threats." But the sensor spoofing was only the first wave. While Velthari computers struggled to sort reality from illusion, the human vessels began their actual attack, not with superior weapons but with superior tactics refined through millennia of warfare against technologically advanced opponents. The human formation scattered into seemingly random vectors, but each movement was precisely calculated to exploit blind spots in Velthari sensor coverage. They used the gravitational fields of nearby asteroids to slingshot their vessels into attack positions that shouldn't have been achievable with their demonstrated propulsion systems. "They're not using standard physics," Zefdak reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "Those acceleration curves indicate they're somehow manipulating local gravitational fields to achieve impossible maneuvers." Vexara's analysis streams processed the tactical situation with growing horror. The humans hadn't developed superior technology. They had developed superior understanding of how to exploit the physics that all technology depended upon. They were using gravity wells, electromagnetic fields, and even the quantum effects generated by Velthari weapons as tools to enhance their own capabilities. "Fire on the lead vessel," she commanded. "Maximum power, concentrated barrage." The sevenfold Dominion's primary plasma cannon array discharged, sending streams of superheated matter toward the human flagship at significant fractions of light speed. The weapon systems that could melt asteroids and shatter moon-sized stations focused their destructive power on a target that shouldn't have been able to survive even a glancing blow. The plasma streams passed harmlessly through empty space. "Target has disappeared from sensors," Nixavel reported, his voice carrying notes of panic. "No energy signature, no debris field, no indication of destruction. It's simply gone." The answer came from an unexpected direction, directly beneath the Velthari flagship, where the human vessel had somehow positioned itself within the shadow created by the sevenfold Dominion's own hull. It hadn't possessed superior technology to avoid the plasma barrage. It had used superior tactical understanding to predict exactly where the Velthari would fire and positioned itself in the one location where their own defensive protocols prevented them from shooting. "Contact, directly beneath us," Zefdak announced. "Range, point blank. They're inside our defensive perimeter." The human vessel fired a single projectile, not an energy weapon, not an exotic matter disruptor, but a simple kinetic penetrator that struck the sevenfold Dominion's hull at precisely the junction between two shield generator nodes. The impact shouldn't have been significant against Velthari armor, but the projectile had been designed with one specific purpose: to create a resonance cascade failure in their defensive systems. Every shield generator aboard the flagship overloaded simultaneously, their quantum field matrices collapsing in a chain reaction that left the massive vessel completely defenseless. Admiral Kreshimir's voice echoed through the Velthari fleet's communication networks. 10,000 years of warfare teaches you that the most sophisticated weapon is usually the wrong answer. Sometimes you just need to hit the right spot with the right amount of force. Within minutes, the engagement that was supposed to demonstrate Velthari technological superiority had become a masterclass in tactical humiliation. Admiral Vexara watched in mounting horror as her fleet, the pride of the Empire's military might, was systematically dismantled by opponents who shouldn't have been able to threaten a single one of her vessels. The human ships moved through the battle space like predators who had spent millennia perfecting their hunting techniques. They didn't possess superior weapons or defenses. Instead, they demonstrated an understanding of warfare that transcended mere technological advantage. Third Squadron reporting massive system failures, Nixavel announced, his voice cracking with strain. The humans are using our own weapon discharges to overload our targeting computers. Each time we fire, they're somehow redirecting the energy signature back into our sensor arrays. Vexara's analysis streams confirmed the impossible. The humans had identified the fundamental flaw in Velthari military doctrine. Their reliance on technological superiority had made them predictable. Every tactic, every formation, every response had been optimized for fighting opponents with inferior equipment. Against enemies who understood the weaknesses inherent in that approach, the Velthari fleet was helpless. Seventh Wing is requesting immediate assistance, Zefdak reported. Human vessels are using some kind of coordinated attack pattern that's causing cascade failures in their plasma cannon arrays. I don't understand how they're doing it. They're not even targeting our weapons directly. The answer lay in the database they'd spent days analyzing aboard the captured human vessel. Humanity's history of warfare hadn't just taught them how to kill efficiently. It had taught them how to study their enemies, identify psychological and technological weaknesses, and exploit those weaknesses with surgical precision. They're targeting our command protocols, Vexara realized with crystalline clarity. They've identified the quantum entanglement networks that coordinate our fleet actions, and they're introducing interference patterns that disrupt our ability to maintain formation cohesion. It was a strategy that required intimate knowledge of Velthari technology combined with tactical insights that could only come from centuries of fighting technologically superior opponents. The humans had developed this capability by necessity. Their own history was filled with conflicts where victory required defeating enemies with better equipment. The sevenfold Dominion shuddered as another precisely targeted kinetic projectile struck its hull. The impact was barely noticeable from a damage perspective, but the psychological effect was devastating. The Velthari crew could feel their mighty dreadnought being taken apart piece by piece by weapons that their sensors could barely detect. "Admiral?" came a transmission from the research station, Kixnell's voice tight with panic. "We've completed evacuation of all personnel. The human vessel is Admiral. It's not actually a warship at all." "Explain!" Vexara commanded, though part of her already suspected the answer. "It's a psychological warfare platform," Kixnell continued. "Every system we analyzed, every database we accessed, it was all designed to create specific psychological responses in our personnel. They've been conducting a comprehensive psychological operation against our entire military command structure." The revelation struck Vexara like a plasma bolt to the consciousness. The captured vessel hadn't been intended to gather intelligence about Velthari technology. It had been designed to gather intelligence about Velthari psychology. Every interaction, every analysis, every moment of growing fear as they discovered humanity's true nature had been carefully orchestrated to create maximum psychological impact. "They wanted us to discover their history," she whispered. her tendrils, coiling around her interface nodes with dawning understanding. They wanted us to know what we were facing. Admiral Kreshimir's image appeared on her command display once again, but this time his expression carried something that chilled Vexara to her core. Not anger or aggression, but the calm satisfaction of a predator who had successfully stalked its prey. "Admiral Vexara," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent a lifetime studying how to break enemy morale. "Your fleet is intact. Your personnel are alive, and your empire will continue to exist. But you need to understand something fundamental about humanity." The battlefield around them had grown quiet as the last Velthari vessels ceased their futile attempts at resistance. The human fleet maintained their positions, weapons powered but not firing, like wolves. Surrounding prey they had no intention of killing. "We don't fight wars to conquer territory or capture resources," Kreshimir continued. "We fight wars to ensure that our enemies never want to fight us again. Everything you've experienced today, the deception, the tactical superiority, the psychological manipulation, this is what happens when you threaten humanity." Vexara's consciousness expanded to encompass the full scope of her defeat. Her fleet hadn't just been outfought, it had been outthought by a species she had dismissed as primitive. The humans had achieved total victory without firing more than a handful of shots, demonstrating capabilities that transcended mere technological advancement. "Your research station will be returned to you," Kreshimir announced. "Your fleet will be allowed to depart, but you will carry with you the knowledge of what humanity is capable of, and you will share that knowledge with your empire." The transmission ended, leaving Vexara alone with the implications of her encounter with a species that had spent 10,000 years learning how to defeat superior opponents. 3 weeks later, Admiral Vexara stood before the assembled high command of the Velthari Empire, her consciousness tendrils interfacing with the Grand Chamber's quantum communication matrix. Around her, the greatest military minds of 17 conquered star systems waited for her report on humanity's capabilities. "Begin tactical assessment," commanded Supreme Admiral Gexvorth, his bioluminescent patterns displaying the authority of absolute command. "Detail the technological capabilities of human military assets." Vexara's primary consciousness, streams, accessed the comprehensive analysis her fleet had compiled during their encounter. "Supreme Admiral, human technology is approximately 4 centuries behind our current capabilities. Their weapons systems utilize primitive kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. Their defensive systems cannot withstand direct plasma cannon bombardment. Their propulsion technology generates barely 3% of our antimatter drive output." Murmurs of satisfaction rippled through the assembled command structure. Several junior admirals' bioluminescent patches pulsed with anticipation. If humanity possessed such inferior technology, conquest would be trivial. "However," Vexara continued, her voice cutting through the self-congratulatory atmosphere like a plasma blade, "technological capability is irrelevant when assessing humanity as a military threat." The chamber fell silent. Supreme Admiral Gexvorth's tendrils coiled tighter around his interface nodes. "Explain this contradiction." "They defeated my entire fleet without engaging in a single direct confrontation," Vexara stated, each word chosen with surgical precision. "They accomplished this using weapons we dismissed as obsolete, tactics we considered primitive, and strategies that exploited weaknesses we didn't know existed in our own military doctrine." The holographic display activated, showing detailed recordings of the engagement. The assembled commanders watched in growing horror as their most advanced warships were systematically neutralized by opponents who shouldn't have been able to threaten a single Velthari vessel. "This is impossible," protested Admiral Kixthane, commander of the 4th Conquest Fleet. Our plasma cannons can melt through neutronium plating. Our shields can absorb stellar-level energy discharges. No primitive species could—" "They didn't need to penetrate our defenses," Vexara interrupted. "They identified the fundamental assumptions underlying our military strategy and used those assumptions against us. Every tactical doctrine we've developed assumes we're fighting opponents with inferior technology. Humanity has spent 10 millennia developing strategies specifically designed to defeat technologically superior enemies. The chamber's atmospheric processors struggled to maintain optimal breathing conditions as the assembled commanders processed this information. The Velthari Empire had expanded across 17 star systems by overwhelming their opponents with superior technology. The concept of losing to an inferior force was beyond their psychological framework. "Show them the psychological profiles," Vexara commanded. The display shifted to reveal humanity's military history. 10,000 years of warfare, innovation born from necessity, tactical evolution driven by survival against impossible odds. The assembled commanders watched civilizations rise and fall, saw weapons developed not for conquest, but for defense against extinction, witnessed strategies refined through millennia of fighting opponents who possessed every conceivable advantage. They don't fight to conquer, Vexara explained as the historical data flowed across the chamber's displays. They fight to ensure survival. This fundamental difference in motivation makes them exponentially more dangerous than any opponent we've previously encountered. Supreme Admiral Gexvorth's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep questioning frequencies. "What are your tactical recommendations?" Vexara's consciousness expanded to encompass the full scope of her analysis. "Complete strategic withdrawal from all territories adjacent to human space. Implementation of long-term intelligence operations to monitor their technological development. Most importantly, under no circumstances should any Velthari vessel engage human forces unless absolutely necessary for species survival." The recommendation sent shockwaves through the assembled command structure. The Velthari Empire had never retreated from any opponent. The concept of avoiding conflict with a technologically inferior species challenged their fundamental understanding of military hierarchy. "You're suggesting we flee from primitives?" Admiral Kixthane demanded, her voice carrying frequencies of disbelief and rage. "I'm suggesting we avoid extinction," Vexara replied with crystalline clarity. "Humanity represents an evolutionary approach to warfare that transcends technological advancement. They have weaponized their own survival instincts and refined them through 10,000 years of conflict. Engaging them in warfare would be equivalent to teaching them our weaknesses while demonstrating our predictability." The chamber fell silent as the implications of her assessment permeated the assembled consciousness. The Velthari Empire's expansion had been built on technological superiority, but humanity had demonstrated that superior technology was merely another obstacle to be overcome through tactical innovation. Supreme Admiral Gexvorth's tendrils gradually released their grip on his interface nodes. "Prepare the withdrawal orders," he commanded finally. "All fleets are to establish defensive perimeters around core Velthari systems. No vessel is to approach human territory without explicit authorization from this command." As the assembled commanders dispersed to implement the new strategic directives, Vexara remained in the Grand Chamber, her consciousness interfacing with the Empire's strategic databases. She uploaded her complete analysis of humanity's capabilities, ensuring that future generations of Velthari would understand the lesson her fleet had learned. Some species achieved dominance through technological advancement. Others through numerical superiority or strategic resource control. But humanity had achieved something far more dangerous. They had learned to turn every advantage their enemies possessed into a weakness to be exploited. The universe was vast, filled with countless species pursuing their own evolutionary paths. But somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity was waiting, patient and prepared, having spent 10,000 years learning the most important lesson of all. Survival isn't about being the strongest or the most advanced. It's about being the most determined to keep existing, no matter what tries to stop you. The Velthari Empire would remember this lesson, and they would endure by ensuring they never forgot it. In the end, perhaps that was humanity's greatest victory. Not conquest, but the knowledge that some battles are won by never having to fight them at all. They analyzed humanity's warship. Defeat was immediate.